Chapter 13. Jenny had just excused herself from the table, needing a moment away from the hum of polite laughter and the constant eyes. She moved toward the buffet under the pretense of checking the desserts, then slipped quietly into the ladies' room. Inside, she was alone, at first. The sound of heels clicking on marble echoed behind her. She turned toward the mirror just as a small group of women stepped inside, the kind who moved like a unit and spoke in tones dipped in honey. "Mrs. Lancaster," one of them called out gently. Jenny offered a polite smile. They were all stunning in their own way, newly married, if she had to guess, by their bright eyes and the subtle competitiveness behind their compliments. None of them looked familiar, not from Jenny's memories anyway. "We just had to say congratulations," one of them said, her gaze fixed on the diamond necklace around Mandy's neck. "That's the pink diamond Morgan won at the auction, isn't it?" Jenny nodded, brushing her fingers over the gem without thinking. "It is." 10 million, another whispered, eyes wide. "He really bought it. For you." The awe in their voices was unmistakable. One woman laughed softly. "My husband nearly had a heart attack when I asked for a tennis bracelet last Christmas. I don't think he's ever spent more than 50 grand on me in one go." More polite laughter followed. "I couldn't believe it when the auctioneer said, 'Sold,' and Morgan stood up," another said. There were gasps. "You must have done something right." Jenny smiled, saying nothing. They began to introduce themselves: Angela, Pia, Bianca, Marianne, names that passed like champagne bubbles, elegant but easily forgotten. Still, she nodded to each in turn. Then came the last woman. She didn't introduce herself right away. She didn't need to. Valeria Cortez. Mandy recognized her from Jenny's memories the moment she stepped forward. Her features were sharper than the rest, older, seasoned, with a presence that softened the chatter around her. She extended a hand, her bracelet clicking as she did. "You wear it well," she said. "The necklace, I mean. Not every woman can." "Thank you," Jenny replied, meeting her gaze. Behind the smiles, there was something sharper in Valeria's look, an unspoken warning, or maybe curiosity. The others picked the conversation back up. "We heard the Jameses talking about you at dinner," one of them said, nudging Jenny gently with her elbow. "Said it's about time you and Morgan had a little one. You'd have the most perfect baby," another added. "Imagine the eyes." Jenny's smile was faint. People like to imagine a lot of things. That earned a few surprised looks, and a raised brow from Valeria. But no one pushed further. Not yet. And as the others busied themselves checking their lipstick in the mirror, Valeria lingered, watching her quietly. Mandy didn't flinch. She was learning the rules of this world fast. "Still," Angela said lightly, dabbing her lipstick in the mirror, "don't tell me you're not second-guessing the baby thing. I mean, with Celine always hovering around Morgan." Jenny's posture didn't shift, but there was a subtle pause in the way her hand smoothed the fabric of her dress. Just enough to register. Mandy didn't answer right away, letting the silence hang in the air like smoke. She could feel the intent behind the question, masked as curiosity, but sharp underneath. Pia chimed in before she had to reply. "Honestly, the way some of these women behave, it's ridiculous. Models, entertainers, secretaries, they all think they can sleep their way into a fortune if they just pick the right man to cling to." Bianca smirked. "Please. A few beauty treatments and a tight dress, and suddenly they think they're irresistible. Like it's some career plan." Jenny gave a soft, non-committal sound, barely a hum, but Mandy's thoughts stirred, uneasy. It was easy to nod and smile in a room like this, harder to figure out what Jenny would have actually said. But maybe that was the point, no one here really wanted honesty. Then Valeria spoke, her voice cutting through the light chatter like a fine blade. "Don't lighten up on Celine," she said, her tone smooth but unmistakably serious. "Women like her, their power is on a timer." The others fell quiet. Jenny met Valeria's eyes in the mirror. "She's a model. Pretty, yes. But time is not on her side. Her value will fade, and quickly. Especially in this industry. People grow bored, always looking for the next shiny thing. Jenny didn't blink. Her reflection looked calm. But inside, Mandy felt the words settle deep in her gut, not as comfort, but as calculated truth. Valeria stepped closer, adjusting a pearl earring. You, on the other hand, are the wife. Mrs. Lancaster. And Morgan doesn't strike me as foolish enough to gamble that away for a thrill. Men with that kind of power don't trade stability for chaos, not unless they plan to burn the whole house down. Mandy watched her. Something unspoken passed between them. And in that moment, she felt it, that strange flicker of camaraderie, not just with Valeria, but with all of them. These women weren't naive. They knew the rules. Their husbands had secretaries, assistants, friends of friends who stayed too long at meetings. They lived with it. They learned to play around it. She suddenly understood that Jenny had probably been navigating these waters longer than Mandy realized, smiling through the rumors, pretending not to notice Celine's perfume on Morgan's suit, or the way others stared when she walked into a room wearing diamonds worth more than some people's homes. Jenny turned from the mirror and faced the women fully. I'm not worried about Celine, she said softly, but clearly. Morgan married me for a reason. It wasn't smug. It was fact. Valeria's lips curved slightly, like a queen passing judgment, and approving, just this once. Bianca let out a soft laugh. Well, I guess that settles that. Jenny smiled again. The right amount of warmth, the perfect shade of diplomacy. But inside, Mandy was still listening to Valeria's words. Her value will fade. And you are the wife. She didn't know whether to feel empowered, or warned. Valeria lingered near the vanity, her fingers idly smoothing a lipstick case as the conversation shifted again, this time with an indulgent chuckle. Speaking of disasters, she said, have you heard about Ethan Rivas? Angela gasped. The Ethan Rivas? The tech startup boy? The same. Dumped his girlfriend. What was her name again? Ah, yes, Clarice. Daughter of that shipping magnate. Bianca snorted. Dumped Clarice? Is he stupid? Valeria smiled without humor. He seems to think chasing after his first love was the noble thing to do. A failed actress, no less. Used Clarice's influence to start his business, then tossed her aside the second he thought he could stand on his own. Jenny's expression didn't shift, but Mandy was riveted behind her eyes. Marianne leaned forward. Wait, wasn't the rumor that they'd been seeing each other behind Clarice's back for years? Valeria nodded slowly, relishing the moment. She used Clarice's name to get herself invited to premieres, studio meetings. Every connection, every favor, they milked it dry. And now that Clarice has finally let go, the doors are shutting. Angela let out a shocked laugh. She got blacklisted? Deservedly so, Valeria replied. And his family? Bankrupt. They've disowned him entirely. The only reason their name had any weight was because of Clarice's connections. Now they're bleeding money, and he's left with nothing but an unemployed mistress and a failed app. The group burst into laughter, some cruel, some sympathetic, all dripping with the kind of disdain that only the truly secure could afford. Bianca rolled her eyes. Honestly, these women who brag about stealing a man. As if it's a flex. They don't stop to think, Pia added, that if he could cheat with you, he'll cheat on you. It's not a fairy tale. It's a pattern. Exactly, Valeria said. Women who win men that way always think they've beat the odds. They never realize they've just inherited someone else's garbage. Jenny said nothing, but Mandy allowed herself a small, secret smile. Then the conversation drifted naturally, like wind changing course, to the inevitable topic. Celine. She must be near retirement, no? Angela mused, touching up her blush. She's what, 30? 31, Bianca whispered. I saw her Wikipedia once. Well, that's the end of a modeling career, Marianne said with a shrug. Unless she's pivoting to business, and let's be honest, she's not exactly known for her brains. Maybe that's why she's so fixated on Morgan, Pia said slyly. If she plays it right, she can convince him to invest in her little side projects, if she even has any. I heard she still doesn't own property. I doubt she even has savings, Angela added with a cruel laugh. Just branded handbags and favors owed. Mandy smiled inwardly, letting the sound of their laughter wash over her like silk. It wasn't exactly kind, but it was the truth. Or close enough. Jenny, outwardly calm, dabbed her lips with a tissue, but her eyes were drawn to the mirror again. And that's when she saw it. A glint of red under one of the stalls. Stilettos. Louboutin. Patent leather. The exact shade of red Jenny had seen on Celine earlier that evening. The laughter around her faded into static as Jenny stared at the reflection. Mandy went still. Celine had been there the whole time. Hiding. Listening. Jenny kept her face impassive, didn't miss a beat. But when she turned slightly, pretending to toss a piece of lint from her skirt, her gaze locked with Valeria's. Valeria followed the glance. Her eyes drifted to the mirror. And her smile turned razor sharp. Well, Valeria said lightly, just loud enough to carry. Some women know when to leave the stage with dignity. Others, she trailed off, turning to the group, cling to the curtain and hope no one notices their act is over. More laughter. This time, Jenny didn't have to fake her smile. Mandy, deep inside, was practically glowing. Valeria tapped Jenny's shoulder gently, her smile razor sharp. Her voice, though sweet and calm, carried clear enough for the stall behind them to catch every syllable. If you ever find out that Morgan has been giving money or gifts to Celine, she said, you can sue her and make her pay it all back. Jenny blinked. Wait, you can actually do that? Valeria's smirk widened, pleased with the curiosity. Absolutely. That money, as long as it's earned during the marriage, is legally considered marital property. If your husband diverts funds to another woman without your knowledge or consent, say, expensive jewelry, designer handbags, rent, even a down payment on a car, those gifts can be classified as wasteful dissipation of assets. She'd have to return it? Jenny asked, careful to keep her tone neutral, though Mandy's interest burned beneath the surface. If not in cash, then in court, Valeria replied coolly. And if she refuses? Civil contempt. And if fraud or deception is involved? Jail isn't off the table. She's right, Angela chimed in, adjusting her lipstick in the mirror. My cousin went through something similar. Her ex-husband was spending thousands on his personal assistant. She sued the girl for interfering in the marital estate and won. The assistant had to sell her condo to pay the damages. I love that, Pia added with a laugh. The man cheats and the side chick still has to pay. Bianca leaned in, smirking. So much for getting the bag. Jenny gave a small, amused smile, folding her hands. And if they have a child? Her voice was soft, but the question made every woman in the room pause, even the ones pretending not to listen. Valeria didn't miss a beat. Then she'll pay for that too. If that child was conceived during my marriage, my husband's money is still my property. And I made sure, before I ever walked down the aisle, that any infidelity, emotional, financial, or physical, voids his rights to everything we built together. That's the beauty of a well-drafted prenuptial agreement. If he cheats, he leaves with nothing but the clothes on his back. Angela let out a low whistle. I need the number of your lawyer. Marianne laughed. Imagine cheating and ending up broke. These men don't fear God, but they should fear a contract. The women chuckled as Bianca added, honestly, if more wives did that, mistresses wouldn't be so bold. And women wouldn't celebrate stealing a man like it's some kind of win, Pia muttered. Like girl, if he cheated with you, he'll cheat on you. Jenny's eyes briefly flicked to the mirror, and the visible tip of a red stiletto in the stall behind them. Her lips curved ever so slightly, but she said nothing. Valeria noticed it too. She turned back to the mirror, dabbing powder under her eyes before delivering her final blow, light, offhand, devastating. And let's be honest, girls. Celine's already 30. In this industry? That's practically retirement age. I hear she hasn't invested in anything either. No business, no foundation, no brand. Maybe that's why she's clinging to Morgan. Hoping he'll fund her next chapter before the curtain falls. The room erupted into soft, scandalous laughter. Jenny tilted her head, pretending to fix her earring, but Mandy was smiling inside. She could feel Celine's silence from the stall. The stiletto didn't move. Power shifted quietly in rooms like this, not with shouts, but with carefully chosen words and the kind of laughter that could ruin reputations. And tonight, Mandy, inhabiting Jenny's poised, beautiful body, was finally learning how to play the game. Jenny walked out of the ladies' room with the other women, her shoulders relaxed, her posture taller than it had been all evening. The laughter, the veiled threats, the sisterhood of beautifully brutal women, it had done something to her. No, to Mandy. Mandy had never believed Morgan was the type to cheat. Not really. There was a hardness in him, a kind of discipline that didn't lean toward recklessness. But Celine was different. Shameless and persistent, the kind of woman who thrived on blurred lines and quiet whispers in dimly lit rooms. But not anymore. Now, if Celine had a shred of self-preservation, she'd think twice before ever trying to slip between Jenny and Morgan. And if she didn't? Well, she'd just handed Jenny a weapon. As the group neared the door, Jenny suddenly slowed. Curiosity stirred. The women said their goodbyes, drifting back toward the ballroom, but Jenny paused by the mirror, pretending to adjust her lipstick. Then, with silent steps, she slipped back into the stall nearest the wall and closed the door behind her. She waited. The marble echoed again. Just as she expected, the door creaked open. Celine stepped out from her hiding place. The moment she believed she was alone, the act fell away. Her perfectly poised face twisted in a sneer as she stormed toward the mirror, muttering under her breath. Stupid little princess. Always so perfect. Perfect face. Perfect husband. Perfect life. Celine slammed her clutch on the marble counter, her voice rising in frustration. She doesn't even know what she has. Always clinging to Morgan like he's hers, like she deserves him. She laughed bitterly. She's so boring he can't possibly want her forever. She doesn't have what I have. There was venom in her words now, spit between teeth. I should have had that life. I should have been the one wearing that diamond tonight. Celine stared at herself in the mirror, breathing heavily, shoulders heaving with resentment. Jenny didn't move. Not yet. She just listened. And when Celine finally gathered herself, fixed her lipstick, and walked out, the room was silent again. A beat passed. Then, Jenny stepped out of the stall. Her expression didn't flicker, if anything, she looked amused. So, the snake had teeth after all. But what Celine called up the perfect life had been anything but. And most of the chaos had one name scribbled across it like graffiti. Celine. Yet she still believed Jenny had it easy. That was the funniest thing she'd heard all night. Jenny gave her reflection one last glance, tucked a loose curl behind her ear, then turned and walked out. Her heels clicked across the ballroom's polished floors as she scanned the crowd, and spotted him. Morgan, standing near a cluster of business partners, talking politely but looking distracted. The kind of distracted that told her he'd been looking for her. She didn't hesitate. She crossed the floor with grace and purpose, slipped her hand into his without a word. He looked at her with surprise, then softened. His fingers intertwined with hers naturally. Jenny smiled. And as she turned her head ever so slightly, her gaze fell on Celine, lingering by the bar in a cream silk gown. Their eyes met. Jenny's smile deepened. Celine's lips thinned into a sharp line. She turned her head, but not before Jenny caught the flicker of fury in her eyes. Perfect. Power had shifted. And Jenny, no, Mandy, intended to keep it that way. Chapter 14. The banquet hall glittered with the soft gold of chandelier lights, reflected in the polished silverware and crystal glasses. Morgan stood beside Jenny, his hand gently resting on the small of her back. She didn't flinch away this time. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it lightly in hers, their fingers brushing like a quiet confession. He glanced at her, then smiled softly, almost boyish, almost like the man she used to believe he was. Jenny didn't smile back. But her expression softened, her blue eyes momentarily losing their usual storm. Her lips parted, uncertain. She turned her head slightly, and caught sight of Celine. The woman was laughing a little too brightly, a hand on a man's shoulder, leaning in just close enough for it to mean something. The man, easily mid-40s, salt and pepper at his temples, grinned like a fool, clearly enjoying the attention. Mandy watched her, quietly. Coldly. The way Celine tilted her head, the way her fingers brushed her hair like she was posing for a camera, none of it was natural. She wasn't just being charming. She was auditioning. Mandy's thoughts pulled back to the whispering women in the restroom earlier. Their comments, though dressed in gossip, had the weight of truth. Models, singers, actresses, they're just accessories now. Pretty distractions at events like these. No one from real money would marry them. Looking at Celine now, Mandy didn't just believe it. She knew it. The performance was flawless, but hollow. Celine wasn't here for love. She was here to be seen. To be desired. Maybe even to be talked about. But never seriously considered. Not by the men who mattered. And Mandy? Mandy was no accessory. She tightened her grip on Morgan's hand. He glanced down, surprised. Then, without saying a word, he pulled her just a little closer. For the first time all evening, Jenny didn't resist. She let herself lean into his side, blue eyes still cool but no longer distant. Across the room, Celine finally noticed. And her smile faltered. Jenny walked with grace toward the buffet table, her heels barely making a sound on the polished floors. She moved like someone who belonged, chin high, expression unreadable. But inside, Mandy was rifling through drawers of memories that didn't belong to her, Jenny's memories, fragmented and soft around the edges. She searched for any trace of who Celine really was. There wasn't much. Just the image of a girl with a father who died young, a life that blurred after that. Raised by an uncle. Always polished, always perfectly poised, but her story had gaps. Holes that no one seemed eager to fill. Aside from her inappropriate closeness to Morgan after the marriage, Mandy found nothing solid. And now, Celine was standing beside her, a flute of champagne in one hand, her lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Contrary to popular belief, Celine began, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve, I did grow up in high society. Jenny turned toward her, her smile faint. Oh. That must have been hard. Especially with your father dying so young. Celine stiffened, but only slightly. Jenny continued smoothly, isn't your aunt, your uncle, and that sweet little cousin of yours ashamed of you chasing after a married man? Celine blinked. The once proud daughter of Mr. Smith, Jenny went on, voice sweet as syrup, now reduced to someone clawing for the title of mistress. And here I thought girls like you were taught better. She smiled then, a smile that did reach her eyes. Cold, sparkling, and cruel in its precision. Mandy, not Jenny, looked Celine up and down with that meticulous, upper-class judgment. The kind you could feel like a slap. Not a strand of hair, not a crease in her dress escaped the scan. Celine's nostrils flared. Her hand twitched. And then, Mandy saw it, the tilt of the glass, the faint tremble in Celine's fingers. Go ahead, Mandy said, her tone low and deliberate. Spill it on me. She took a step forward, chin raised, daring her. Let's give the press something really memorable to talk about tonight. Celine's slap cracked through the air like a whip. The glass in her hand trembled, but didn't spill, her palm, however, struck Jenny clean across the face. Jenny's head whipped to the side as the impact knocked her off balance. Her heels scraped against the floor, but she didn't catch herself in time. She fell backward, her body folding like a marionette with its strings cut, and hit the ground. Gasps rose from the crowd. The room went still. And then... Jenny. Morgan's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. He was at her side in seconds, crouching down, cradling her head in his hands. Jenny, wake up, come on, Jenny. But she didn't respond. Her eyes fluttered closed, her breathing shallow. Morgan's voice broke. Call an ambulance. Now. He turned his head just slightly, enough to glare daggers at Celine, no words, just that cold, thunderous look that made her take a step back. His fury was unmistakable. Lorenzo, who had pushed through the crowd by then, stormed forward with fire in his eyes. You, he jabbed a shaking finger at Celine. You absolute witch. I swear to God, I will ruin you. You'll never walk another runway, never get a single ad campaign, not even a backup commercial role in this entire country again. He didn't wait for a reply. Instead, he turned his attention back to Jenny as Morgan lifted her into his arms. I'm riding with you, Lorenzo said, jaw clenched, following Morgan out the door. At the hospital, the air smelled of antiseptic and tension. Morgan paced outside the emergency room while Lorenzo yelled at him. You knew that woman was trouble, he snapped. You knew how she looked at your wife and you still let her within breathing distance. I never touched her, Morgan said through gritted teeth. That's not the point. Lorenzo slammed his hand against the wall. It doesn't matter if you were faithful. You should have protected Jenny. You should have shut that woman down the moment she stepped over the line. Before Morgan could reply, the door swung open and Dr. Reyes stepped in. Lorenzo was on him immediately. I want a full report. Everything. Bruising, any internal injuries, all of it. I want something I can use to press charges. That woman assaulted her. Dr. Reyes held up a hand. Let's take it one step at a time. She just regained consciousness. Inside the emergency room, Jenny lay against the pillows, blinking at the lights above her. Her brows furrowed in confusion. She turned her head slowly. Why am I in a hospital again? Dr. Reyes gave her a patient smile. You fainted. We're going to run a few tests, just to be safe. Morgan was sitting beside her, fingers still wrapped around her hand, his thumb brushing softly against her knuckles. His face was pale, his eyes dark with concern. Jenny, no, Mandy, gave him a tired glance and a faint smile. It's probably nothing, she murmured. You're overreacting again. Dr. Reyes stepped closer. Do you remember how much alcohol you had tonight? She shook her head. 0. I don't drink. Then after a beat, she added carefully, any more. You can test my blood alcohol level if you want. Dr. Reyes gave a short nod. We will. Just to be thorough. Jenny sighed, rolling her eyes a little as she looked toward the ceiling. I'm going to stay here for a couple days again, aren't I? Just until the tests come back, Dr. Reyes replied, his tone calm. Mandy closed her eyes again with a long, slow breath. Figures. The morning after the incident, Celine sat in the agency's sleek conference room, the atmosphere tense. Her modeling agent, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, stood across from her, arms crossed. Do you have any idea what you've done? The agent began, her voice sharp. That viral video labeling you a mistress and a homewrecker has put the agency under fire. Clients are withdrawing, and our reputation is at stake. Celine opened her mouth to respond, but the agent held up a hand. Save it. Effective immediately, you're dropped from the agency. Your actions have consequences. As Celine gathered her belongings and made her way to the exit, she was confronted by a group of younger models. They blocked her path, their expressions a mix of disdain and satisfaction. You've slandered the modeling industry by trying to ruin a marriage, one of them said. Now you've fallen from your high horse, down to the dirt. Another chimed in, looks like you're eager to start your retirement. Oh, I forgot, you're already 30. Hope you have some savings, because no one will want to work with a woman like you again. Celine pushed past them, stepping out of the agency into a barrage of reporters and flashing cameras. Online, her name was being ridiculed and slandered. She had become infamous, a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far in the entertainment industry. A few days later, Jenny sat upright on the hospital bed, her fingers nervously twisting the blanket on her lap. Morgan sat beside her, holding her hand gently, while Lorenzo leaned against the wall, arms crossed but eyes watchful. The door opened and in came Dr. Reyes, clipboard in hand, a rare smile on his face. Well, I have good news, he said. First off, Jenny, it's a good thing you didn't drink at the auction. Your test results show 0 traces of alcohol, which is important because, he looked between the three of them before finishing, congratulations. You're pregnant. Jenny blinked, her eyes widening. Morgan's hand froze in hers, and then he slowly turned to her, eyes softening with cautious hope. What? She breathed. You're pregnant, Dr. Reyes repeated. Confirmed. Hormone levels, vitals, all good. And based on your results, you've been carrying for quite a while. Lorenzo, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly grinned. Wait, what? Jenny, you're pregnant? He shot forward, grabbing both her hands with a laugh. Oh, my God. This is amazing. I've got to tell the family, the James family's going to flip. Jenny smiled faintly, trying to absorb the shock and joy all at once. Dr. Reyes continued, second piece of good news, the CT scan came back clean. No signs of a concussion. So you didn't faint because of the fall. It was due to overexertion, too much stress. Morgan nodded quickly, guilt flickering across his face. We'll be careful this time. No more banquets. No more anything that could push her. But Lorenzo, still in celebratory mode, suddenly paused, his brow furrowing. Wait. What do you mean this time? Jenny lowered her gaze. I had 2 miscarriages already, she said softly, almost too quietly. She didn't look at her cousin. Lorenzo froze. His celebratory expression vanished, replaced with a mix of disbelief and protective outrage. 2. And no one told me? Jenny still wouldn't meet his eyes. Dr. Reyes interjected calmly, giving Jenny a little space. We were about to do a quick ultrasound. From her small bump, I originally assumed she was further along, perhaps over 10 weeks. Morgan looked hopeful now, the panic and guilt replaced with a fragile kind of anticipation. We want to see it, he said quickly. We'll do the ultrasound. Jenny gave a small nod. The technician wheeled in the machine, and moments later, the cold jelly was spread over Jenny's lower belly. The room went silent as the black and white image flickered to life. Dr. Reyes furrowed his brow, adjusting the wand. His eyes moved quickly across the screen. 1, 2, he murmured. Then, blinking in surprise, 3. He turned to face them with a stunned but delighted smile. It looks like you're not just pregnant, he said. You're having triplets. Jenny's breath caught in her throat. Morgan's jaw dropped, completely speechless. Lorenzo's eyes were wide with disbelief. Triplets, he echoed. 3 strong heartbeats, this is a miracle. It's hard to conceive, twins or triplets, naturally, but you did. Dr. Reyes confirmed, tapping the screen gently. Jenny stared at the monitor, her heart pounding. Triplets. After everything she'd been through. After the miscarriages, the hospital stays, the constant stress, triplets. Morgan reached over and kissed her temple, his voice low and hoarse. We're really going to have a family. Lorenzo, still in shock, just muttered, the James family's going to have a heart attack. Then, after a pause, he added with a crooked smile. Dr. Reyes gently cleared his throat, bringing the stunned trio back to reality. Jenny, he said with a calm but firm voice, as exciting as this news is, I need to emphasize something important. Carrying triplets means this will be a far more delicate pregnancy than a singleton or even twins. You'll need to take extra care of yourself, physically, emotionally, and mentally. He glanced down at his clipboard. When a woman carries multiples, her body is under more strain. There's a higher risk of preterm labor, gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, anemia, and even placenta-related complications. We usually recommend close monitoring throughout the entire pregnancy. Jenny nodded slowly, a little overwhelmed. And most likely, Dr. Reyes added, we'll need to perform a C-section as soon as the baby's lungs are fully developed. With triplets, it's rare for a pregnancy to reach full term. Typically, we deliver around 32 to 34 weeks to avoid complications like intrauterine growth restriction, cord entanglement, or fetal distress. He met Morgan's eyes. In many cases, triplets are born small and need help breathing or feeding. That's why we may need to put them in incubators after birth, to support them until they're strong enough. Morgan squeezed Jenny's hand. We'll do everything right this time. Later that afternoon, Morgan stepped out to handle Jenny's discharge paperwork. Lorenzo followed, tension simmering just below the surface. As soon as they were in the hallway, Lorenzo's restraint snapped. You should have told us, Lorenzo hissed, stepping in front of Morgan. About the miscarriages. About everything. Morgan stopped in his tracks, jaw tight. We didn't want to tell anyone, he said evenly. Because every time we saw your side of the family, all we heard was how Jenny had to give you a child. She was terrified of disappointing you. That's not an excuse, Lorenzo snapped. She's your wife. She nearly died. Twice. And now she's carrying 3. You should have been taking better care of her. Morgan's expression flickered, guilt cutting through his calm. If anything happens to her during this pregnancy, Lorenzo said, his voice low and deadly, all the blame goes to you. Then, without another word, Lorenzo turned and walked out of the hospital, leaving Morgan frozen in the hallway, speechless, and more aware than ever of the weight now resting on his shoulders. Chapter 15. The sky was just beginning to bruise with the purples and ambers of dusk as Lorenzo pulled into the gravel driveway of the old James estate. The car crunched to a stop beneath the towering columns that guarded the front entrance. Ivy climbed the stone walls like green veins, and the scent of old books, tobacco, and pine lingered faintly in the breeze as he stepped out. Inside, the estate was still. Time had folded itself into the very bones of the house. Shadows clung to the corners, and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer sounded louder than usual. Lorenzo moved down the dark hallway, his shoes thudding softly against the polished floors. He found his grandfather in the old study, where the light was low, the air thick with aged paper and sandalwood. The old man sat in his allowance chair, the fire casting gold against the silk of his deep purple bathrobe. Despite the snow-white hair, his face had the color and clarity of someone still holding onto life with an iron grip. His cane leaned casually at his side, untouched for the moment. Above the fireplace hung a photo, timeless and proud. The elder James himself, his late wife beaming in pearls, and between them, Jenny's mother, poised in a red velvet chair carved from mahogany. The old man often said that photo was all that remained of a time when the James name meant something. Lorenzo hesitated, then stepped forward. She's pregnant, he said with a smile. Jenny. You're going to be a great-grandfather. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the old man laughed, a deep, triumphant sound that filled the room and seemed to shake the dust from the beams. His eyes lit up, glassy but proud, and he slapped the arm of the chair. Well, I'll be damned, he said, a grin blooming across his face. A James baby. God's finally remembering this family. Lorenzo gave him time to bask in the news. He let the moment hang, warm and golden like the firelight. And then, he gave the hatchet. She had 2 miscarriages before this, Lorenzo said, his voice quieter. Morgan knew. But they kept it from all of us. She didn't want the family worrying. Didn't want to make it a thing. The old man's smile vanished like a candle blown out. What? Before Lorenzo could brace himself, the old man snatched up his cane and, with surprising speed for a man his age, brought it down hard across Lorenzo's back. "You useless little bastard," he growled, voice cracking like thunder. And Morgan knew? He knew and he said nothing. What kind of goddamn man lets his wife carry that pain in silence? The study door slammed shut from the gust of the blow, and curses echoed through the thick hallway walls like rolling drums of war. Lorenzo stumbled, shielding himself, gritting his teeth but not resisting. He knew this was coming. Finally, the old man lowered the cane, but his eyes burned with fury, his chest heaving. "Call Morgan," he said in a voice low and cold as steel. "Tell that boy to get his ass here now. And tell him if he ever lets her suffer alone again, I'll kill him and raise that child myself." Lorenzo nodded, catching his breath, pain slicing across his back, but something in him relieved. The honey had sweetened the air, but it was the hatchet that reminded him. This family had roots that ran deep, but they were gnarled, stubborn things. And now, the storm was about to move. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Morgan Lancaster stepped out, his stride purposeful, his phone in hand, Jake trailing a step behind. They had just come from a board meeting, another crisis averted, another fire put out, but Morgan's thoughts were already shifting to the evening ahead. Dinner with Jenny, maybe a moment of peace. Then he saw them. Two men in black suits stood silently by the entrance of his building, like shadows that had peeled off the night. No logos, no greetings, just presence. Imposing and still. Morgan paused mid-step. His spine straightened instinctively, a deep breath filling his chest as he slowly lowered his phone. His fingers twitched briefly at the cuffs of his tailored suit, adjusting them with a flick of precision. Jake looked over, sensing the sudden tension. "Something wrong?" Jake asked, his voice low. Morgan didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened just slightly. "I'm being summoned," he murmured. Jake's brows pulled together in confusion until one of the men stepped forward, giving a sharp nod. "Mr. Lancaster," he said in a formal tone, "you've been summoned by the old master." The other man, without a word, opened the back door of a sleek black SUV parked by the curb. Morgan stood still for a moment, then turned slightly to Jake. "Tell Jenny I'll be home late," he said, voice calm but cool, too calm. Jake gave a small nod, his eyes narrowing in concern. "Everything all right?" Morgan didn't answer. He stepped into the car with measured grace. The door shut with a quiet finality, and the SUV pulled away into the descending dusk. Inside, Morgan sat still, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. He knew the rules. A call was a request. A visit was a favor. But a summoning? That meant something was about to change. The SUV's engine purred steadily, but Morgan barely heard it. His eyes were fixed on the city outside, but his mind had already drifted far from the present. The past tugged at him like a chain around the neck, dragging him back to a life he'd buried but never escaped. A life where Jenny had died. The grief had carved a hollow inside him, wide enough to swallow everything else. And then came him. John James. Jenny's grandfather had adopted Morgan posthumously, not as a grandson, but as a curse. Dragged him to the old James estate like a dog on a leash. Morgan remembered the moment the heavy doors of the study opened, the polished mahogany floor reflecting the cold light of the chandelier. The men in black had thrown him to the ground like garbage. He landed hard, bruised ribs slamming against the carpet, right at the feet of the man in the purple robe. John James hadn't looked like a man at death's door. The heart monitor beeped beside him in a steady rhythm, and 4 lines snaked up to his thin, veined arm, and clear tubing delivered oxygen through his nose. But there was fire in his eyes. Rage. Purpose. The kind of fury that could keep a man alive just to get even. And Morgan had been the target. The suits beat him in front of the fireplace, where the portrait of the James family loomed overhead, Jenny's mother smiling in red velvet, unaware of the generations of pain to follow. The old man didn't flinch. If it weren't for you, he spat, I wouldn't have had a goddamn heart attack after my daughter's death. And you would never have had the chance to charm and marry your way into my granddaughter's life. Morgan, bloodied and silent, had said nothing. There was nothing to say. Not then. I'm going to take everything you value, the old man said with finality. And then, when you have nothing left, maybe you'll understand what it feels like to lose. And he did. John James took back Colin Corporation. Crushed Lancaster Incorporated until Morgan was left with ashes, no fortune, no home, no name. Even the media turned against him. The world moved on. And Jenny, she stayed dead. But what the old man never understood was that all those things, companies, buildings, empires, were dust. All I wanted was my wife back. Meanwhile, in the Lancaster estate, Jenny carefully adjusted the place settings, her movements mechanical as she set the last piece of silverware in place. The delicious smell of salmon, roasted vegetables, and a fresh salad filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere. She was restless, waiting for Morgan, who had promised they would have dinner together. Nan, ever the caretaker, hovered nearby. Jenny, let the maids take the dishes to the table. You've been standing for too long, darling. You need to rest. Jenny, though reluctant to admit it, allowed Nan to guide her back to the seat at the head of the table. The maids bustled about, arranging everything perfectly. The meal was impressive, a nutritious blend of salmon, fruits, vegetables, and a fine bottle of red wine set aside for Morgan. But despite all the care put into it, the absence of Morgan felt heavier with every passing minute. The door opened, and Jenny's gaze lifted, hoping for Morgan's return, but it was Jake who entered, alone. His eyes met hers, and without a word, she knew something was wrong. Where is he? She asked, her voice tight. Jake hesitated before answering. He's with some men from outside the company. At the entrance. They were waiting for him. Jenny's heart sank. What happened? Why didn't he come with you? Jake's expression softened. It's complicated. He told me to come back and let you know he'll be fine. Jenny's frustration boiled over. But he promised. I know, Jake replied, his voice low. I'm sorry. Jenny clenched her fists, trying to push down the frustration. Why wouldn't he come home? Her eyes flickered to the staff, then to Jake, as her mind raced to find someone who might be with Morgan right now, someone who could explain his delay. Mandy's presence in Jenny's mind, now fully aware of the memories she could access, began to scan the thoughts that Jenny had buried. Mandy sifted through Jenny's fragmented recollections of the day, people she knew, those who had been close to Morgan, any likely candidates who could be at the company with him. Lorenzo? No, he wouldn't. Mandy thought briefly about Morgan's relationship with his business partners, but those thoughts faded quickly. Then, like a flash, one name came to mind. Jenny's grandfather, John James. Mandy's mind wrapped around the memory of the last time she had seen him, standing firm, his protective presence never far from Jenny. He was an imposing figure in the family, someone whose concerns often went beyond just business matters. It was easy to imagine him stepping in during Morgan's absence. He could very well be the one who has kept Morgan tied up. Jenny pushed the thought aside, trying to refocus, but the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. John James had always been protective of Jenny, sometimes to the point of being overbearing. Maybe, just maybe, he had something to do with Morgan's disappearance tonight. She was startled when Jake's voice broke through her thoughts. You all right? Jenny blinked, coming back to the present moment, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing against her phone. Yes. I don't know. It's not like Morgan to leave me waiting. Jake raised an eyebrow. You sure you're okay? Jenny forced a smile. I'll be fine. Just keep the food warm. I'll be right back. She stood up, making her way toward the grand piano in the corner of the room. She pulled out her phone and opened the piano app, trying to soothe the unease that was gnawing at her. As the music flowed through her fingers, Mandy's thoughts continued to swirl. The SUV rolled through the familiar iron gates, and for a moment, Morgan felt the breath leave his lungs. The James estate loomed before him like a memory frozen in time, towering windows, ivy-covered walls, and that cold, stately silence only old money could afford. The driver didn't speak as they pulled to a stop under the grand stone archway. The moment Morgan stepped out, the doors opened. He was expected. The butler gave a polite nod and gestured down the same hallway Morgan once limped through in another life, bloodied and broken. The chandelier above still sparkled like it was lit with ghosts. The portrait still watched with painted, silent judgment. And then, the study. Morgan stepped in. The scent of cigar smoke and old books clung to the air like a second skin. Nothing had changed. John James sat in the velvet allowance chair by the fireplace, draped in his purple robe. The heart monitor still blinked steadily beside him, the force still dripping. His white hair was brushed back, regal even in age. And at his feet, like before, lay his cane, smooth oak, silver handle carved like a lion's head. He pointed to the floor. "Pick it up." Morgan wordlessly bent down and handed the cane to the old man, who took it with a tight grip, then pointed it at the chair across from him. "Sit. And look me in the eye." Morgan did. The fire crackled between them. The air was thick with unspoken history. "You know why I called for you?" the old man asked. Morgan exhaled. "I assume Lorenzo told you about the miscarriages." The old man's jaw tightened. "And why the hell wasn't I, or anyone in this family, informed?" Morgan's voice stayed even. "Because I didn't want the James family meddling with my wife's emotional state. She barely held herself together as it was. What she needed was space. Not pressure. Not scrutiny." The old man's knuckles whitened around the cane. "You manipulative son of a gun." Morgan didn't flinch. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" the old man snapped. "Cutting Jenny off from her blood. From her family. So you can isolate her and control her like some damn trophy wife." Morgan leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes unwavering. "We didn't tell you, because all you ever do is talk about children. You pestered her. Every visit. Every call. You turned a hope into a weapon." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. The old man let out a slow breath. His grip on the cane loosened slightly. "I know what caused the miscarriages," he said, voice quieter now. "The stress. The rumors. The photographs. Your mistress." Morgan blinked once. But he didn't deny it. "You so much as breathe the same air as that woman again," the old man said coldly, "and I will cut you off. From Jenny. From your children. From everything." Morgan nodded once, slow and certain. "You don't have to. I cut ties with Celine months ago." A long pause. Then the old man leaned back, tapping the cane lightly against the carpet. "I heard it's triplets," he said, voice almost wistful. "You know how rare that is? How dangerous. You think Jenny's body can go through that alone?" Morgan looked at the fire. Then back at the old man. "No. Which is why I'm not leaving her side." "Good." The old man's eyes turned steel once more. "Because if anything happens to her, if there's another loss, that blood's on your hands, Morgan. And I swear to God, I won't spare you a second time." Morgan stood. "Then I'll make sure you don't have to." The two men stared across the flames, old power and new resolve, ancient grief and present redemption, locked in a truce forged by the woman they both loved. In the Lancaster state. The dining table remained untouched, the food growing cold as Jenny sat in the quiet room, staring out of the window. Despite the fragrant salmon, the roasted vegetables, and the crisp salad, her appetite had faded with each passing moment. Alone, she had reluctantly decided to eat by herself. Hours later. A maid quietly entered with a glass of milk, gently placing it on the nightstand beside Jenny's vanity. Jenny gave a distracted smile as she brushed her hair, the soft bristles gliding through her long strands, but her thoughts remained elsewhere. Where could he be? By the time the clock ticked closer to 9, the front door creaked open. Jenny stood from the vanity, smoothing out the silky blue nightgown that cascaded down to her ankles, the matching robe slipping over her shoulders as she moved gracefully down the stairs. When she reached the bottom, she found Morgan standing in the foyer, his coat still on, his expression weary. She walked toward him, her gaze softening as she placed a gentle kiss on his cheek. She immediately detected the faint scent of tobacco, unmistakable, familiar. "What took so long?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with concern. Morgan let out a tired sigh, rubbing his hand over his face before meeting her gaze. "I'm sorry. Grandfather had something important to tell me." Jenny tilted her head, raising an eyebrow. What was so important? Morgan hesitated for a moment before answering, his voice quieter. He found out about the miscarriages." Jenny's heart skipped a beat, guilt clawing at her chest. She couldn't help the sting of the truth. Her grandfather's concern and constant pressure had been difficult, but hearing it out loud now made her feel even more torn. Morgan stepped closer, his hand finding its way to her baby bump. His touch was warm and tender as he gently placed his palm against her. "He knows you're just in your first trimester, but it's not showing that way. I think it's because you're having triplets." Jenny's breath caught in her throat. Triplets. She never could have imagined it. Her belly already seemed to curve in a way that felt like it was months ahead, but the thought of 3 little lives inside her made her feel a mix of awe and fear. "I'm so sorry, Morgan," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "For whatever it is he holds over your head." Morgan shook his head, a soft smile breaking through his fatigue. "It's not your fault, Jenny. It's fine." He placed a gentle kiss on her forehead before guiding her toward the staircase. "Come on, let's go upstairs." As they made their way to the bedroom, Jenny glanced over at him. "Have you eaten yet?" Morgan sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "No, the old man kept scolding me through dinner. I don't even know what he expects me to do." Jenny's heart went out to him. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice full of genuine regret. She wished she could ease his burdens, but the weight of her family's expectations seemed too much for both of them. Morgan looked down at her, his gaze softening. "It's all right, Jenny. We'll figure it out. Just, let's get some rest. It's been a long day." They entered the bedroom, the heavy tension of the evening beginning to ease as they settled in for the night, with the quiet comfort of each other's presence offering a brief respite from the chaos outside.